This is Uncharted, a series of candid conversations about facing uncertainty. When we are called upon to be courageous, the strength of our leadership is tested. Red Direction has developed the Fast Track Your Business program to help you stay aligned to your business's true north. Jess Dewell is your guide. Jess brings you a 20-year track record of business excellence where strategy and operations overlap. Your path comes from consistently working from this special place, your unique true north. Now, here's Jess.
Everybody, welcome to this program, this Uncharted, where I am talking to Jeff Harry. And it's really important that not only are we talking about the business side of things and how we're growing our business, what you hear from all of those business leaders, founders, and owners are the things that challenge them and that they've worked through. And guess what Harry and I are going to talk about? We're going to take that and we're going to take that work further and talk about, you'll just have to wait and see. So beyond that, we're going to go into some of these soft skills, into the importance of communication. And the reason I have Jeff Harry, let me try that again. The reason I have Jeff Harry on the show is because he's combining positive psychology and play, and he's with teams and organizations to navigate difficult conversations. Not only does this help companies, leadership teams address their biggest challenges by embracing a play-oriented approach to work, it also helps us show up differently together, to become a high-performing team, to understand what is healthy and not, what is normal and not, what is productive and not productive that we can measure only, the productive in that we get to create, we get to problem solve. And, I have to tell you a little bit more about Jeff. He was selected by Bamboo HR and Engagedly as one of the top 100 HR influencers of 2020. Not only that, he's been featured in the New York Times, Mashable, and Upworthy. Jeff, I am so glad to have you on Uncharted with me today as part of the Bold Business Podcast.
Woohoo! Let's go. I'm excited.
Let's go. So we're going to just jump right in. We're going to jump in and, anywhere in your career, from when you were in corporate to now leading your company, what's a challenge that you faced that required difficult conversation, and how did you show up? How did you know that that was the key?
I think any challenge that I've had at a company where we needed to evolve or grow or learn from a mistake a difficult conversation had to be had, or multiple difficult conversations. I don't think you can create a psychologically safe workspace without having difficult conversations, right? And I think a lot of times we talk a lot about being like, be your authentic self, come to work and be your authentic self. And it's just like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that mean? Because you say it, but I don't feel it. I don't feel I can actually show up as me. I don't feel as if I can disagree with my boss when they have a really bad idea, but actual psychologically safe workspaces where you can do that, higher productivity, higher morale, lower turnover. And why is that? Because people are able to practice actually having a hard conversation with each other. And they know a lot of times that they're not attacking each other. They're simply attacking the conflict together instead of doing it alone.
Oh, okay. Hang on. We have to stay right there. This shows up in social justice work as well. Mm-hmm. People make mistakes. People aren't typically the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I heard you just say in a different way. And so I want you to repeat that again in your own words, because the importance of what that means, that the people we work with aren't the problem. We're the team that gets to tackle the problem together. However you said that was brilliant. Yeah. And I think that is a place to spend a little bit more time and dissect for our audience.
Yeah, because I think what I meant by that is like, are we attacking each other? Or are we addressing the conflict that is separate from us, right? And I think a lot of times my friend Eric Bailey always says, you either go into a conversation either to understand or to be right, but you can't do both. and everyone's trying to do both, or it's just trying to be right. And if you're going into a conversation trying to be right, you shouldn't have that conversation. You're not ready to actually have it, and I think a lot of times we tell these stories as if we're the hero in our own story and everyone else is the villain because it just fits with, our storyline. And we have to be we have to be a little bit more mature about it. We have to be like, where do we want
What?
to get to?
We have to be
Right.
mature?
I know. Where do we actually want to get to together?
Yeah.
Where I am trying to come from a place of empathy and I'm actually practicing active listening, where I'm not simply waiting for you to finish so I can respond, but I'm listening to you actually what you have to say, and then I'm reflecting back what you have to say so that we make sure we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm. All right. It's interesting because all of the conversations that we've been having recently on the podcast have included some element of active listening. And I'm curious, do you have ideas or thoughts about what is making that so important right now?
Wait, ideas about why it's why?
Yeah. Are there triggers? Are there changes? Are there trends out there in the world that it's like, oh, there's something to this active listening we've been hearing about for decades, and we're going to do something now?
It's so hilarious because it's what we learned as kids. Be kind, be gentle, be understanding. I was just in a clubhouse room the other day where they were like, how do we teach our kids to be more kind? And I had to hop on the stage and was like, we have it all wrong. It's the kids that are teaching us how to be kind because we've forgotten it. What we have to realize is what historical trauma have we experienced, right, at work, and what are our triggers, so that when we're actually going into a conversation and someone says something that reminds you of like some toxic person you interacted with at your last job, that you don't get triggered and you start attacking that person thinking they're Chad from your old job, because they're not. We have to depact a lot of that. So like recognizing your triggers, actually practicing active listening, showing up to understand instead of trying to be right, not assuming so many assumptions like this is how this person feels. Why don't you be curious, as my friend Lauren Yee always talks about, right? Why don't you be curious and actually ask them where they actually stand, right? I recently was in a conversation. I lean more politically to the left, and this person that I was talking with heavily on the right, and she's like this pretty well YouTuber, and we hopped on her YouTube live, and the whole goal was to try to understand each other. We were on YouTube live for 3.5 hours. And what I learned from that was like, don't assume, don't conflate someone else's ideas with her ideas and being like, y'all are in it together, and actually come from a place of empathy and understanding, because a lot of the pain that they're suffering, you are also suffering too, and you can connect on that.
So I want to talk about the fear. There's a fear of difficult conversation.
Uh-huh.
And I think about that because it doesn't matter where we're at. We have a fear of repercussion. And with your HR background, I get that there are things that a company has to do, yet there are things companies that don't do. And
right.
That's something that you and I share in common. We're talking about the messy parts of work. We're talking about how when they're messy, they don't necessarily stop or take away. They can actually be additive. And so how do you encourage leadership teams to think about things from a place of, it's okay that we have fear. When we know where we're going and we're clear about it, we can make it through. Is there more to it than that?
Yeah. I mean, my friend Keisha put me onto an acronym for fear, which is false evidence appearing real. And, I think from that standpoint, first off, we tell a really great story that prevents us from taking the risk, right? Now, the risk actually might be true. You might have that difficult conversation and you might get fired from it. It's probably very unlikely, but I don't know your situation, right? So you have to obviously be like aware and know, but here's where focusing when you are having a difficult conversation and not attacking someone's character, but actually addressing behavior. When you're talking to someone and you're like, hey, Chad, when you're in meetings and you cut off Jess and Jeff in meetings, the impact you're having is you're communicating to us that you don't want us to speak. Is that your intent? Because that's a different way of saying it than being like, Chad, you're a horrible person. You're a toxic person and I hate you, right? So we have to, again, be focusing on addressing behavior, not attacking character. Then secondly, and I talk a lot about this of like, I do it from a play standpoint, because I consider play the opposite of perfection. And perfection is like rooted in shame and ego. And we're always trying to be like, well, what are the perfect words to say in order to navigate this conversation? There are no perfect words. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make so many mistakes. But what is play? Play is messy. Play is experimental. Play is curious. When I've facilitated conversations around race, when people are like being racist by accident, like just microaggression, just being curious and being like, oh, I didn't know that was offensive. I'm now learning. It's okay to have those mistakes as part of it. Because one thing I keep saying all the time at work is in football, you practice all week for a 3-hour game. But in work, you get no practice. No practice in having a hard conversation. No practice in how to manage or lead. How many managers do you know that have gotten promoted because they did the last job well, but they are horrible managers and they have no training in it. So of course, this manager then can't facilitate a difficult conversation between two individuals or between themselves and someone else. They've never practiced before. So when we're running our workshops, we're creating a playground or a practice field where you can practice. How does it feel? How does it feel to sit in the awkwardness? What am I exactly going to say? Oh, let me try that. Oh, I know that doesn't feel right, but let me try this. Okay, maybe this is. So that when you actually leave our workshop, you're like, I can do this. I can actually do this. This is not going to be as hard as I thought it would be.
I find this fascinating because it's true. And I get brought in to fix culture. I get brought in to break through growth barriers. And the two actually, that's not true. I get brought in to attack and get through growth barriers. And it turns out it's all about the culture every single time, because the talent that we have doesn't fully show up because of those, I call them unwritten agreements. Do you have a phrase for that you use that's different than because unwritten agreements, it's what we do, not what we say?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have a phrase like that when you're talking about play. And when you were giving the example about the meeting and the behaviors that we have. So as a person that carries authority in an organization, and maybe more importantly, as a person who doesn't carry authority in an organization, how do we fully show up in a way that we're not getting burned, yet we can still evoke change because we happen to have an awareness that we know could help? And it doesn't matter if it's the higher level or the lower level. We see it and we want to help. How do we do that?
You have to identify who your allies are. Who are the people that actually agree with you? And then when you're doing that, then you approach it from a standpoint of impact, right? Hey, for example, when I'm running a workshop called Dealing with Toxic People at Work Through Play with my friend Gary Ware, right? And when we were like, when I know Chad, for example, has been really toxic. Now, if you go to your boss and you just tell him that, that's not really helpful. But if you go and go, hey, Chad, I know he brings in about $1 million a year in revenue, because usually they're the brilliant jerk, and Simon Sinek talks a lot about this of like, the Navy SEALs will never take the brilliant jerk, regardless of how athletic, how strong, how smart the person is, because it destroys the team. So when you go and you be like, I know Chad is, bringing in $1 million, but he also caused 4 people to quit last year, which cost us $1.5 million. That's the impact that's having. Are we okay with this? Are we okay with this affecting your bonus and my bonus? When you're speaking it from that standpoint, I'm again talking about impact. That's how it actually is presented in a way that is much more powerful than just simply complaining for the sake of complaining.
Oh, that's interesting. Cy Wakeman is this
Oh, I
author
know
that
Sai.
You know Cy?
Yeah, I've
I'm
met
in
Sai many
her.
times. She's awesome.
Yeah, okay, because I'm in her Life is Messy mastermind for this year. And I'm loving the work that she's doing. And she actually talks about the detriment of the open door policy, because what has been found is it's a complaint department.
Yeah.
Complaints don't help. And what I hear you saying is, so I'm building on what I've learned and what you're bringing to the table, and what I'm going to reflect back to you is that I'm hearing it's important to practice. Look, I'm practicing one of the things too, by the way, reflection back to make sure I understand. It's important to practice. It's also important to recognize if it's weird, it's probably the way forward.
Yeah.
I've kind of been hearing you sense that. And if I say that, what does that bring out for you?
Yeah, like if it's uncomfortable, yeah. Like if it's something both exciting and scary, it's probably the place where you need to be going, right? And I think there's the other point of, what was I going to say? You have to recognize as a team leader where your responsibility lies. So here are the questions that I would put onto a team leader, right? To see, A, do you have a psychologically safe workspace? How do you find that out? Ask your staff. Do they feel comfortable saying anything to you, in the workplace? Ask your staff, what's the culture like? How would you describe the culture? What are the unwritten rules that we actually haven't written down, right? And then another thing that you could ask that's a really great question is, what is something you'd like to share that you're actually scared to share with me? And do that at a meeting, or do that, one-on-one, and see how many people actually tell you. Because if you can't even ask those questions, you don't have a psychologically safe workspace.
Ta-da!
And then you need to really ask yourself, what am I going to do?
That. And so I'm going to flip that around too, not only from the team leader, I'm going to flip that around to every single person in a company. Can you feel like you are welcome and it doesn't matter if you make a mistake or you bumble around, or you can say what needs to be said? Can you talk about what we do and how it's different than what we say we do? And can you go to somebody, even if you don't know if they agree yet and you don't know if they're your ally, can you face that fear and move forward, hopefully with an ally, or even at another? By the way, this is something where reaching out to you or me or somebody in a network to go, I don't know who to talk to. Do you have somebody I could talk to about this, so I know who to approach in my organization if I don't know who my allies are there? I think that's also a key. Am I willing to take a step toward being able to share?
Yeah. Yeah. And to go a step further and be like, well, what's the benefit of infusing play into the workplace?
Yes, thank you.
Stephen Johnson always says, like, the future is where people are having the most fun. What were the organizations that were thriving in 2020? TikTok, Clubhouse, Hulu, Disney Plus. Why? Because they were willing to take risks. They were willing to be adaptable. They would be willing to be resilient, and they were willing to have hard conversations. And here's why I say that, because if you're not having difficult conversations, you are going to become the next Blockbuster. If you're not bringing shared humanity into the post-pandemic workplace, people are going to leave. They don't want to be there anymore. And if you're talking about like the additional benefits of play, look at Google's 20% rule. They give their staff a fifth of their time to pursue whatever meets their curiosity, as long as it helps Google. What has come from that program? AdSense, which pays the bills, Google Meet, which many people use, Gmail, which all of us use, because they allowed their staff to play. This is when you're able to create psychological safety and give freedom for people to pursue their zone of genius, the thing where they forget about time, the thing where they get into actual flow. When you're giving that opportunity, lower turnover, higher morale, higher productivity, but also the best ideas possible coming out of the workplace. Right now, I think there was a study recently found that most top executives, like VPs, like right underneath top brass, I think 85% of them said they don't share their best ideas. So most of the products that we're using right now are the mediocre version of the products that it could be.
It's hard to make me speechless. I did not know that. Okay, people listening in, you're listening to the Bold Business Podcast. This is Uncharted with Jeff Harry. I have to tell you, we are going to take this conversation further into the Fast Track Your Business Today platform that Fast Track subscribers do get to access through their True North. So hang tight, hear the rest of the conversation. And if you're not part of the Fast Track Your Business Today program, think about what you've heard Jeff say today and imagine what he's going to say next.
You've been listening to Uncharted. Fast Track Your Business subscribers receive access to a vast set of resources, including extended conversations to this and other Uncharted episodes. Visit fasttrackyourbusinesstoday.com. Your preparedness and the right perspective is absolutely necessary when you find yourself somewhere uncharted. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for production assistance.